And good evening. We are live with Interchain Live. I'm Ryan Munn in White River Junction, Vermont. We've got Roger Glovsky on from Randolph, Vermont, and we've got a couple of guests here with us. We've got Pete from ULedger. Peter, I'm sorry, CEO?
I'm the Chief Operating Officer of ULedger.
Chief COO, yes, of ULedger, which is an enterprise blockchain platform. And we've also got Alex on here, who's with VinChain, an automobile history blockchain solution. And Alex, I'm sorry again, Miami, is that correct?
Yeah, based in Miami.
Miami. Excellent. So, guys, so real briefly, I'm just going to talk a little bit about, Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies in general. Everybody's a little bit depressed right now, but I'm still feeling the love. I think, the technology speaks for itself. It's imperative that people get a little skin in the game and do some research, become educated. Wouldn't you agree, Roger?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, it's been down for a while now. It seems like it's been forever since we hit the highs in December. So I think everyone's feeling like, the bigger crash. But I think it's really just an opportunity for the market to consolidate, for everyone to have a chance to get, re-energized. And I think we're going to see it pick up pretty soon.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I think people just need time to learn what this stuff really is, just because it's crypto doesn't mean it's gold, right? But when you do some digging, there's definitely some real gems out there. There's some real progress being made. And so we're excited to find as much of that as we can. And so first, I want to talk a little bit on the broad spectrum. I go all over the place with blockchain, talking about, the different ways it can be applied. And so, Pete, I bet that you can give us some ideas of the different industries and sectors and ways you could implement some blockchain solutions.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks, Ryan. We at ULedger are very much focused on blockchain as an enabling technology for a whole host of different things. Right? People really typically think about blockchain or have heard of blockchain in connection with cryptocurrencies, and our view is that the potential uses of the technology are much broader than that. So, our product is an enterprise-oriented blockchain platform. And what it allows companies to do is very quickly, very easily take advantage of, what really is the key feature of blockchain, which is its ability to create an immutable, unchangeable, untamper-proof and unchangeable history of data. And that solves a number of problems. We started ULedger with the notion of addressing audit. The notion of, if you're ever subject to an audit or a regulatory inquiry or a legal challenge, the need to prove your data, right? Prove the content of your data at a point in time. You're called upon to do that in an audit scenario, and it's harder than it sounds. Our IT infrastructure today is it's based on data. It's based on databases that excel at managing changes to vast amounts of data, and that's great. But the ability to sort of lock in content at a particular point in time and be able to prove what data content was at any given point in time in an environment that's structured around changing all that data is difficult. And so, that was the original premise that we developed, that we used to develop our application. And since then, when you apply that very general term, right, what can I do with an immutable audit trail or an immutable data store? Turns out you can do many things, right? The audit scenario certainly is a prime use case for us, but we're also using it for things that are that when you think about applying the blockchain to this type of data, you wouldn't ordinarily think that you could or should. Like, for example, we have use cases where we are assisting companies in intrusion detection. So, for example, when a hacker gains entry to some environment, it's common practice for them to try to cover their tracks by deleting log file information. Mm-hmm. Well, an immutable copy of that log file, and you compare that against the syslog that a hacker knows where it is and can change, you can spot those attempts to change that data and flag those, those occurrences as things that need to be investigated. Maybe that's not somebody breaking in, but it's certainly something that you should investigate. And the very notion of log data sounds very mundane, and the notion of trying to put that on a Bitcoin blockchain or Ethereum main chain, it's absurd. So clearly a different approach was called for, and a different technology was called for, and that's kind of the essence of what we're doing. We're enabling that basic function of blockchain for the enterprise. Private data, yet public corroboration of the content of that data, and doing so in a very highly scalable way and a very easily integratable way.
Excellent, excellent. Now, to be clear, Pete and Alex, you guys didn't know each other before, right?
Nope.
All right. All right. So in theory here, Alex, you could have or could be a client of ULedger here. So Alex, share with me, how is it that you are taking all of what Pete just described, I'm presuming, and applying it to your solution?
Well, so we're applying the blockchain in our own way. We also see like the vast amount of value in the immutable aspect of the blockchain. And one of the biggest factors that I see is the fact that whoever puts the data to the blockchain belongs to that individual, as opposed to belonging to this collective entity. So in the case with Facebook, whatever data you put on Facebook is now theirs. But if there were to be some sort of a decentralized Facebook, all of the data would still belong to you. And that is one of the biggest, innovations here. It's the data ownership. And so applying that to vehicle history is, well, one, obviously the immutable aspect. The nature of history is that it's supposed to never be changed, right? So it's a very obvious use case. And then also what we're doing is, besides just collecting a ton of data, right? So from traditional sources, we're also taking it a step further. In traditional vehicle history, the data everywhere but the vehicle itself, right? It comes from DMVs, from national databases such as NNVIDIS, from insurance reports, from damage reports, from the word escapes me right now. But the point is, basically, authorities, from the police reports. Wow, right. That was such a simple word; it flew out of my brain. So we're taking it a step further, and we're also collecting data directly from the vehicle itself. And so we're encouraging the use of OBD devices, which is basically like this little IoT thing that plugs into your car and it collects data. And so, one, we promote data collection by offering token incentives. So if you are the driver of a vehicle, you basically get paid to do what it is that you do for free anyway, right? Drive your car. So now you do it with this device plugged in, and every time your data is pulled up with your permission, you get paid for it. And so that's really the innovation here. So we create an immutable ledger of vehicle history, and also we align the incentives of all of the participants in the game. Excellent.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, it sounds like I want to plug one of those into my car. Where can I get one?
Well, the devices are not available yet. We're taking this one step at a time. Right now, our ICO, we're developing our blockchain. Recently finished the testnet. We're extensively testing the API and making sure that everything works. And we're about to open it up to a small select a set of partners who are going to test it with their own systems.
Awesome. Awesome. Sounds good. So what actually, you want to drop a couple of dates? You have kind of a timeline coming up, right?
Yeah, we recently released the second version of our mobile application. So that's the thing that's the mobile application gets paired with your OBD device. And so that facilitates a lot of different features, but we're kind of taking it a step at a time here as well. So we recently released the second version of it, and introduced more functionality into the app. And within the next week and a half, we're going to release the next version as well. As far as the blockchain, that's going to be ready by the end of our ICO, which is around April 15th. Well, the end of the ICO is exactly April 15th, but the blockchain is going to be ready right around that time. And yeah, that's
Awesome.
good stuff.
And the device, is the device going to be something that connects to your phone via Bluetooth, or is it going to connect to 4 and 5G networks?
The cellular networks are much more expensive. It's going to be through Wi-Fi and Bluetooth.
Yep. Awesome. Awesome. So Pete, does this sound like anything that you guys have been working on?
Well,
yeah, it does actually. It sounds, you know, there's a number of use cases that we're currently working on that are, you know, at their essence, exactly what Alex just described. Right? You want a history of data. I love what you said, Alex. The nature of history of data is that it shouldn't change, and so the ability to ensure that is something that you know, more and more companies, I think, are realizing that they really need. They don't quite have it to the extent that they thought they did, and they're realizing that they need it. Some really good, you know, and I think your use case is very representative of the type of conversations we're having right now. We're doing a lot of work around supply chain, for example, you know, being a really good example of there's a number of parties involved in production and delivery of, you know, fill in the blank, whatever the supply chain is for. And the need for those parties to, you know, have a reliable and a centralized and a secure method of saving and accessing that information and having no ability to, you know, question basically, or no dispute that that is what actually happened, is really important. People are definitely waking up to that. Frankly, these conversations these days, which is great.
So it seems like one common factor between both, you know, Alex and Peter's companies is this being able to use the blockchain to assure the integrity of the data. I'm wondering if you know, Peter and Alex can each talk about the scalability factor. I mean, there have been issues about, you know, whether and how well blockchain technology will scale in, you know, widespread use. You've got kind of different applications for it in the enterprise versus, you know, a broader, you know, VIN type of worldwide application. What are the challenges that you face with scalability, and how are you overcoming them?
So I guess I'll speak to that right now. One of the issues of scalability is, of course, that the blockchain, all of the nodes, all of the participants in the network have to keep the entire ledger. So that means you're limited by your weakest link, right? So if you put a terabyte of data, can you guys hear that?
Yeah, there's definitely some feedback. Maybe somebody tries to put their microphone on mute.
Yeah, there we go. All right. Yeah, so just basically all of the participants in the network would now have to, you know, carry an extra terabyte of data, which of course eliminates a lot of the potential participants in the network and thus centralizing the whole system. So one of the ways that we're getting around that is not to actually put the data on the, like the raw data on the chain. What we do is we hash the data, and we have like this encrypted version of it, and just the encryption goes on the chain. So you can encrypt, you know, as much information as you would like, up to terabytes of information, and that gets converted into a little hash that's the weight of a couple of bits. And so we could literally hash all of the information in the world and still put it on the chain and with no issues. So also by hashing the information and keeping the hashes on the chain, that's also coincidentally solves another problem for us. Which is another layer of security, right? So if the information was in its raw state on the blockchain, that is a huge liability for us, because just another participant, another competitor could come to the chain, be like, okay, thanks, this is all ours now, and just leave with it. So it would not be a very good idea for us to do that in the first place. So when they show up, you know, they see a bunch of encrypted data, but all of that encrypted data verifies the validity of the original data. And if, you know, for the viewers out there who don't understand like how trapdoor math works or like how cryptography works, if any, like even the smallest, tiniest, littlest thing was to change in the original information, the entire hash would break. It would be completely different, and it would be impossible to fake this data in any kind of way that would keep the hash the same.
So as much as people say like, oh, anything's hackable, to an extent, that's true. But what blockchain does is it gives you the evidence it was hacked.
It gives you the evidence that something was changed, right? And that's really all that we want, because it diminishes the value of hacking the system in the first place. Right. Because let's say you did somehow get into one of the centralized servers, managed to change some of the information, you would not be able to break into the chain, override the entire block, so however many blocks worth of work. And depending, of course, that also depends on how like the consensus mechanism works. So if in our case, it's delegated proof of stake. So that means you would have to overpower all of the witnesses within the network and just, right.
Now that brings up another question, which is one of the challenges with scalability, right? Which is spam on the network. And there's attacks on the networks where, you know, transactions are flooded through or things are put on the network to bloat it. But because you're not dealing with a fully public network, right?
Exactly,
the consensus mechanism you're using helps to address the issue of spam on the network.
Yeah. The having a delegated proof of stake consensus mechanism definitely helps with scalability and helps with well, let's take a step back, because our first, you know, spam filter, so to speak, is, again, it's not a public chain. You can't just come right. and contribute your data. It has to come through a moderated way, right? So if, for example, you're the government and we're sourcing your data from an Invitas, so to say, you're already a pre-approved entity. You have absolutely zero incentive to spam the system. And anyway, let's say if one of the channels did somehow start spamming the system, that's detectable. And there, you know, very simple spam filters could be set up, because now you're not monitoring the amount of inputs into the system is limited. So monitoring those inputs through like a regular set of like checks is very easy as compared to a public chain like Ethereum, where just literally anybody could come and write some code.
Right. And not to say that everything's spam, right? It's just to each is, you know, the eye of the beholder. By having a private blockchain, you eliminate a huge aspect of the scalability problem, which is dealing with the public.
yeah, exactly. It's a semi-private chain.
Yeah, awesome. And Peter, let me get to. Still get a little feedback there. The vacuum in your
yeah, office? Sorry. There's a fan going on in my PC. So this is
wow, that's the world's strongest fan.
Well, but I'm sure you can comment to this. You know, scalability challenge. You know, what are some of the other scalability challenges that you run into, and how are you addressing them in various ways?
Yep. Yeah, so scalability obviously is it's critical for adoption of technology like this within the enterprise. And we do a similar thing to what Alex just described with regard to the data. We describe it a little bit differently. We characterize it as being kind of a hybrid between a private blockchain in which the data is secure, but since one entity owns that chain from top to bottom, there really isn't that level of immutability. And then there's a public blockchain in which there's data that's shared, and that's what provides the network corroboration and the immutability. But it requires the sharing of data. So we're a hybrid in that sense, where the data is kept private, like Alex described, it's the cryptographic hash or the signature of that data that is shared among the network. So that gives you the ability to corroborate content without actually ever seeing that content. So we did that for data security and privacy reasons, but it had the side effect of obviously helping out with scalability as well. The other thing that we do that's unusual is a process that we call cross-Merkleization. That's something that we've got a patent pending on, and it's this notion of corroboration taking place within the network. And we avoid the term consensus because that implies the entire network has to agree on something, with Bitcoin and Ethereum and those. In our case, what we're trying to do, we're not addressing the same use case as Bitcoin, right? We're not enforcing the supply of a particular cryptocurrency or solving the double spend problem that prevents, more than one person from owning the same Bitcoin at the same time. We're not solving those problems, and there's good reasons why Bitcoin's mining algorithm works, as it does. It certainly would be overkill for the type of use case that we're addressing with our solution. So this notion of cross-Merkleization is the process of nodes within the network independently verifying each other's data. And they're doing that by, basically acknowledging the content at a point in time and providing corroboration back to the node that's requesting that, that data has been agreed at that point in time. And that happens on a peer-to-peer basis, so there's actually no central administrator to that. There are other blockchains out there that do, what you refer to as timestamping, or that corroboration of content at a point in time. But it's typically done by a central authority, and you then have to, trust that central authority to do that correctly and to maintain the blockchain properly and all that. Ours is a little bit different from that standpoint. It's more of a peer-to-peer, and it's a trustless system as a result. And it's very fast. The notion of proof of work is very lightweight. Right? Again, we're not trying to solve those problems that Bitcoin is trying to solve. We're merely asking the rest of the network to corroborate data content that we are declaring at a particular point in time. And that's happening on any customer's individual blockchain or multiple blockchains are doing that simultaneously. So that corroboration happens in a peer-to-peer way among the network, and it's highly scalable for those reasons. None of those nodes are really doing a lot of work, and they're all incented to participate because they're requesting that same service from the other nodes.
Awesome. So not to diverge too much, but you have some dates coming up also. I don't know if I can unmute you. There we go.
I think maybe one of us has the YouTube link open, so that creates the sound feedback.
Oh. All right, hang on 1 second there. Yeah, that could be it. I've seen that happen before. Well, anyway, I was going to ask Pete if you had upcoming dates for you Ledger, and I'm sorry, I'm having trouble unmuting you.
I'll do that.
There you go. Yeah, did you have any upcoming dates for you Ledger, or have you done an ICO, or are you guys involved in an ICO?
We are not doing a traditional ICO. We've done a token sale. We've actually completed a seed round of a token sale and raised a couple of million that way. And we're currently conducting we've been watching the ICO environment very carefully, and the regulators' approach to it very carefully. Obviously, we're a US-based company, so we want to be careful not to run afoul of anything that the Securities and Exchange Commission is doing or might decide to do at some point in the future. And they've certainly telegraphed pretty clearly that a sale of tokens to non-accredited investors is a problem if they are securities and they say they've never seen one that isn't. So given that, we are conducting a token sale only to accredited investors for the moment, and pursuing ways in which we can address non-accredited investors under SEC regulations that permit that activity. So we're pursuing a couple of options there. A Reg A plus filing might be one of those. So we are 90 to 120 days away from any kind of public sale.
Okay. All right, cool. And so I'm going to mute that again. And so, Alex, I was kind of hoping to have you guys chat a little bit about this. Let's just say, for instance, Ledger is doing an accounting and HR implementation for, say, an auto dealership, and that auto dealership is utilizing VinChain. How do those things potentially work together, and what are some of the challenges of kind of getting things to all work together?
Well, I mean, that's completely subjective because it just depends on the data that's being accessed or the data that's being contributed to both chains. So if there's kind of like this, like if like if Peter's chain is like a man in the middle, so to speak, like let's say it monitors any and all communication, and like that gets stored somewhere on a server, and that gets hashed, and the hashes get put on the chain.
Like the title applications go to the DMV, and
Yeah,
the transaction for the purchase and sale of that, title in the dealership occurring, that's an accounting system that they're running, and they might be running a blockchain solution along with that to keep up an easier accounting method, right? So they can just pull all the data they need instead of having to go through and audit all of those accounts. And then at some point there's data being stored relative to VinChain to provide this global vehicle history on the blockchain, right?
Yeah. So I mean, the two chains should have no trouble, communicating, because again, both are open and public to a degree, not completely
Sure.
public.
And to use Pete's word, right, they're corroborating each other, right, in the process of doing business. Each chain, while they're doing independent things, as you're crossing data from one to the other, they're each corroborating each other's data. Would that be accurate?
I would say so. Again, it really just depends on like the details of like how each of those things is set up.
Right.
I personally right now don't see any reason for that to not be a possibility.
As far as APIs, it's just a matter of developers.
Yeah, as far as that's
the API and develop an interface that the title clerk can work with.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, I think we've pretty much covered, I think, the basics of what I wanted to really know about what your project's doing. Is there anything else that you want to share about it, or that's anything else to be looking forward to?
Well, I mean, we covered pretty much the high level overview. What we do. We're in the middle of our ICO now. We surpassed our soft cap a little while ago,
Awesome.
Which is exciting stuff. Yeah, I mean, check us out on vinchain.io if you're interested.
There you go. Awesome. And I imagine you guys are, you're on Telegram. That's your primary social channel?
Yeah. Telegram is the go-to. It's like a better Twitter for crowdfunding.
All right, cool. So vinchain.io on Telegram.
To get to our Telegram, it would be better if
just go to the site, right, and click on the invite.
Yeah, exactly.
Perfect. Awesome. And Pete, sorry, go ahead, Roger.
Yeah, let me just ask Alex, did you have any of the challenges that Peter mentioned with regards to the ICO? I mean, did you have this issue of whether you were a utility token versus a security token?
Yeah, we ran up against this issue when we were as we were solving it. We're obviously in legal counsel. We have an official published legal opinion on our website that our entire legal team assesses us to be a utility token. Of course, the statements of the SEC, in light of the statements of the SEC, they do consider just about any ICO to be a security, but that's in itself is not final, right? Sure. So I really just right now there's still uncertainty like within the space, and like we're still in legal counsel, and we consider ourselves to be a utility token.
Are the laws that passed in Wyoming attractive to you? Are you aware of what they got written up there?
Actually, I'm not familiar with the laws in Wyoming. We're incorporated in Estonia.
Oh, okay.
Oh, cool.
Thanks for saying that. That's helpful.
Yeah, that's kind of important. That's an important little tidbit.
Yeah.
Can you also talk a little bit more about that? So when you say you're incorporated in Estonia, why Estonia? And is it one company or two? I mean, a lot of blockchain companies, they have a foundation and then they have a separate organization.
It's one company. Estonia is just very ICO friendly.
Cool.
All right.
And so you're an Estonia company doing business in Miami.
Yeah.
Cool.
Awesome. Right on. And so if I could ask a little bit more about maybe just, and feel free to withhold an opinion, but so we're working on passing legislation in Vermont, we'd like to open the door for blockchain-based business entities. So I take it you're not super familiar with what's written necessarily in Estonia, or are you?
To a degree, yes.
Okay. So, as we discussed a little bit earlier about kind of what we're trying to do here. What is it about Estonia that's made it friendly? And is there anything that sounds appealing in what we discussed in terms of this blockchain entity in Vermont?
Well, as far as the blockchain entity in Vermont, like that whole initiative is just to, again, just to kind of recap what we were talking about, that whole initiative is just to kind of set ground for future legal frameworks, right?
Yeah. So to create and to allow an entity to apply to the Secretary of State to do business as a blockchain entity, and in that recognizing software-based decision making and decentralized structure.
Yeah, so I'm not familiar with Estonian regulation as far as the DAOs, uh, being that we're not one.
Okay.
So I'd have to look into that.
Gotcha. And so as far as what's made it friendly in Estonia, it's just in how they refer to the tokens themselves, or as assets, or as simply as utilities.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Okay. Okay.
Like the latter.
Gotcha. Yeah. And I would encourage you looking it up. In Wyoming, one of the components was that they passed a utility token component to their legislation that basically said that you could sell a utility token as long as the tokens purchased by investors were locked up until they were usable. In other words, they couldn't just buy them pre-sale and then sell them on the market until they're actually functional in the system. It's kind of an interesting caveat, but
yeah,
does
that's very close to the definition of a utility versus a security. Like the fact that the token has to already have functionality within the system. Otherwise, you're just selling a promise, which is exactly how you get classified as a security.
Right. Okay. So in that case, then, how is the timing of your ICO working to your favor in that regard?
Well, in terms of like the token usability, we already have an existing platform. That's the point. We're not selling a promise. There's already functionality within the system, and we're using the ICO to expand our operations.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay. So your platform is already recording vehicle history data, or
Yeah.
capable of it.
Yeah.
Okay. Is it recording data, or is it capable of it? Both.
Both.
Both. Awesome.
Both.
Awesome. Where are you recording data?
Right now we're. Oh, hello.
Yep.
Right now, yeah. Sorry, my everything went dark. Right now we're recording it in centralized servers.
Okay, gotcha, gotcha. And where, like geographically, where are you getting the data from?
Through, well, it really depends on the data provider. So we have, we get the data through our partners, and our partners get it from all over the place.
Gotcha.
So.
Okay. 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 Interesting. Very cool. Well, I think I'm out of questions. Do you have any for us?
Not that could come to the top of my mind right now. I mean, you guys are working on some pretty interesting stuff. Roger, like, I'd like to hear about like your own, like what you're working on, Ryan. We spoke a little bit about, your own initiatives.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll let Roger pipe up.
Sure.
Roger and I are both in the entrepreneur networking world in Vermont. So.
Yeah. So we're really trying to make Vermont attractive to blockchain companies. So a lot of the questions that Ryan was asking about, in terms of the legislation, is how do we, create legislation that makes it more attractive for a blockchain company to start in Vermont, and how do we create, if you will, networks, incubators that are focused on blockchain companies, and to try and attract more software engineers, particularly those with blockchain technology, to the area. We see this as obviously one of the hottest fields, and it's going to have wide-ranging effects on really all aspects of our lives, and we'd love to have Vermont take a lead in that regard.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. So yeah, I don't really have any more questions.
Awesome, cool. And Pete, I don't know if you got anything else you want to add in here. I can tell you a couple other people that we've talked to a lot of times. We're working on connecting with open source developers and really trying to tap into the convergence between some of the social impact initiatives in the crypto space and the real social impact missions and initiatives in Vermont for Vermonters. And so in that light, I try to paint blockchain as a real, not just the solution, but a path to solutions, right? And so I want to paint that picture well, but also hopefully make more connections in the future, and maybe bring you guys in to talk to other people in Vermont about how your solution can help their business or other state and municipal challenges.
Yeah, it's made, this industry space is quite amazing, and it seems like we are only at the very beginning of it. So we're thrilled by that. I mean, it's really that things change every day, and that's exciting. We're living in exciting times, and that's not for everybody else, but we have to really like it here. And the potential within government, the potential in all sectors is really has, like we've talked about here, has yet to be realized. We think we're just in the early stages. Government in particular could be such a beneficiary of this technology. We've started to poke around with that with a couple of the city of Boise here. We're based in Boise, Idaho. The city of Boise is a customer of ours, and they've seen the promise really kind of early on. Like we talked about Wyoming a bit, they're clearly one of the more forward-looking, governments, and the ongoing potential of that, both from data integrity and from a reduction of layers of administration perspective. There's huge potential. So we can't wait to see how it evolves.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys all for being on here. Stay connected for a minute. After I disconnect, we'll chat for another minute. But thank you all for being on. Thanks to our audience for jumping on and paying attention, waking up your neighbors and get them to learn a little bit about the future and modern emerging technologies. So thank you, Alex. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Roger, for joining us. And thank you all. Have a good night.
Thank you.